it's Mike Page, the attorney, Mike Page. You know, I mean, I thought he worked for the board, you know. I mean, when I only went to one meeting in the end, or one or two of the board back in 2010. And, but the first time I went, I had to go to the 11th floor of 24 Waterway, that's where the developer is. And I went to the appointed time and I stood in the lobby there, you know, they've got secure lobby. And I started a sign and he said, how can I help you? I said, well, I'm here for the board meeting. Board meeting? You know, calling people. You know, just stand by, just have a seat, you know. And, the board meeting was cancelled. You know, the board meeting was just cancelled. You know, I could think boys, the guys, you know, they're busy. You know, they just got together and say, hey, we won't have a board meeting. You know, so they rescheduled the board meeting. So much for your public meeting. It's not even in a public place. It was in the developer's office. You know, so the next time they had a board meeting, and a whole bunch of us showed up there. Jim, I think Jim Doyle was. Did you go, Jim?
I went to one.
Anyway, we went to one or two, and we get in there, and you know, they're all just good old guys sitting around the table there. They're chatting and talking, and we're waiting for them to call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order. Come on, you know, let's do the business of the road. Come on. So, well, you know, we're not ready to go yet. Mike's not here. You know. Yeah. So, you know, Mike comes in. It's all informal. There's no structure, no procedure. Just, you know, and members of the developer saying their piece, you know, it's just very, very loosey-goosey. Didn't seem serious to me.
Minutes of the meeting?
Oh, I don't know. They do have minutes typed up, but I don't know who keeps them. Someone there is a secretary who keeps the minutes. Yeah, they have a secretary. They do have that. Yeah. They build roads outside the road. Yeah, the enabling legislation says they can build roads inside the road or outside the road. Well, if you live in Creekside, which is that part of the Woodlands that is south of the river of Spring Creek. What's it called? Spring Creek? Spring Creek. Yes. South of Spring Creek, that's in Harris County, and that's Creekside, and they built roads down there. Well, you know, they're allowed to. They've got enabling legislation, you know. And they could build, like Muleshoe, my favourite town, they could build roads in Muleshoe if they wanted to. With that tax money that we don't pay, it's, you know, paid by the poor old lessees and tenants and landowners that are in the road. You know, they pay the tax. Am I in trouble? Am I going too long?
There's your guy.
Oh, okay. That's, yeah, okay. Thanks. So, where are we up to? So, yeah, they building roads outside the road. Okay, that's great. They lend to the county. Well, I thought that was funny. You know, because he said, you know, sometimes the county lends to us and they pay it back when we get bonds and we pay it back. Well, this last time around, the year before last, they wanted to widen Research Forest. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And the county didn't have the money, and they promised that they would, you know, they would lend them $6 million or $3 million or something. And as soon as the bonds got approved, you know, the road bonds got approved for the county, they'd pay the road back. We never heard anything more about it because you know what happened? We didn't vote for the bonds.
Right.
And we never heard whatever happened. How did they get their money back? I do not know. You know, they probably, who knows? We can only guess. Because, you know, there's not really much transparency in the road. There's really not that much. You have to go a long way to get it. You know? Here's what we were talking about, the candidates versus the residents that James had asked me. You know, you're a resident of Texas, not a felon, not insane, not otherwise disqualified. There's no time limit. You know, you can just be, you know, just run for the road. Residents, okay, residents, you have to be a registered voter. You know, and you have to have 30 days. You have to file, you know, your residence, your voter registration 30 days in advance, and that's for administrative purposes only, according to the Secretary of State. And there's no residency time required in the state of Texas. There's 25 states in the United States where there's no time requirement to establish residence.
To vote or to be a candidate?
To vote.
To vote.
To vote. And the difference is to be a candidate. We'll see some examples, or a big example in a minute. But yeah, we've had cases here in the county where the question of candidate residency was argued and challenged and so on. And, you know, we've got a real good example of where, you know, the establishment kind of turned a blind eye. You know, Greg Abbott just didn't seem, you know, the courts sided, and, you know, it all worked out happily ever after for this particular candidate. You know, and I've got nothing against that particular candidate. I just want equality under the law. You know, that's what we want. That's what we want. Yeah, yeah. So, okay, we'll keep going before we run out of time. So, okay, here, February 24th, this article came out, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, because this influenced me hugely. I read this article, and you can go to Texas Watchdog, you know, and you can find this, and it's called Voter Law Loophole, Tarrant County Voters Registered at Federal Office Building, right? Now it tells the story, and I've got the bullet points here kind of thing. There were 9 DEA agents or their wives, or husbands, I don't know which, but you know, DEA people were registered to vote at the DEA office out on Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in Tarrant County.
But that was the residence, you mean?
They had chosen that as their residence. They were registered to vote at the office. And they had chosen that as their residence. When I read that, I mean, it tweaked me. I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. But, you know, my view has changed because I understand the principles behind it.
Right.
And these are just little excerpts from the article. You have to go to the article. It's the way the law is written. And the only way it would be changed is through the legislature, said Steve Rayborn, Tarrant County's elections administrator. What's the way? Well, they're allowed to do that. The residency requirement can be determined by the voter, said Randall Dillard, spokesman for the Texas Secretary of State's office. And yes, a work address is okay if they consider that their residence. Dillard cites a section of the state's code regarding residency. Residence means domicile, that is, one's home, fixed place of habitation. I think it says abode, habitation, we'll see in a minute. To which one intends to return after any temporary absence. It says last year, a Tarrant County voter used a vacant piece of land as his residence on the voter roll, said Raven said. The fact is, any registered voter can challenge the voting status of another voter, Raven said, but it generally doesn't do any good. It just generally doesn't. Why? Well, we'll see. There's some opinions. There's some opinions from qualified people. This was, I think Dennis Bonner's not in office anymore, but this was in the article too. He said any time, they asked him about it, he said, you know, the legislature needs to look at this. You know. He says any time there's an issue regarding voter access, the tendency is for politicalisation. And boy, oh boy, have I found that out, you know. Yeah. So anyway, so I read that article, and what did I do? What did I do? I ran down the road, I registered to vote in the residence inn, and just in wanton, you know, disregard for the law, based on an article, I went and did that. No, I didn't do that. No, I picked up the phone and I called 2 people. I called Carol Galtney, who was our elections registrar, and I called the Secretary of State. Now, when I called the Secretary of State's office, I asked for Randall Dillard. Now, he's just a PR guy, you know, a public relations guru or something like that. And I said, you know, I read this article, is it true? And he said, yeah, stand behind everything. Yeah, that's all true. And I asked, you know, I started asking more details about it. And he said, well, you know, you really need to talk to one of the attorneys, you know, more, you know, knows the law. So they put me through this guy, which I won't tell you his name. And but if you want to hear his name, come to the trial. So, so I spoke to this guy, and I said, you know, I've read this article, and I said, we've got a funny case here where there's not going to be an election. You know, we've got some guys wanting to run for this seat on this board. And I said, there's not going to be an election. He said, he's just going to call off the election. And he says, there's no voters in the district. And I said, you know, I found voters. I found, and we'll see in a minute. Let's see, where we are here. This was, we'll just stop here. This was who owns the developer's building, right? Now remember, Mike Page had told us that he just, surprise, surprise, he found these voters. Well, this is who apparently owns several office buildings. This is the incorporation papers for what's called 24 Waterway LLC. See? Because that's for that building. And it's personally owned by Dirk Lorkia, the voter, one of the voters that sprung up in the Woodlands. So what that means, just to put that together, is that Mike Page didn't know this voter, didn't know he existed, was not aware of him. Apparently he owns this and that, and it just kind of came up. The guy owns the building that the developer's in, and that the RUD meets him, but he didn't know him. I just thought that that was kind of uncanny. Okay, consulting with the highest authority, yeah, right. So here we go, this is from the Secretary of State's office. It says the Secretary of State is, as Chief of Elections Officer for the state of Texas, is responsible for ensuring the uniform application and interpretation of election laws throughout Texas as stipulated by the election code. The law of the land for Texas voters. So the Secretary of State is the interpreter of the law of the land for Texas voters. That's who I spoke to. And so I told him about this scenario. And I said, vacant land. Well, there's always a story behind it. I think this was the case where a guy's house got blown away or burnt down or something or other, right? And he owned that land, although land ownership actually has nothing to do with voter registration and residency. You know that, right? But he owned the land, and he was going to rebuild the house, and he was registered to vote there. And people said, well, the guy doesn't live there, it's vacant land. Well, Texas law says that he calls that his residence, right? And we'll see the definition fleshed out in a minute. If he says that's his residence, that's his residence. It's a common law idea, And what's more, it's just because if you can't say what your residence is, then who's going to say it? Any ideas? The government. The government's going to say what your residence is. Where does that happen? Not anywhere where there's freedom, Not anywhere where there's freedom. The government doesn't say where people live in a free country, right? So, okay, keep going. Oh, here we go. We're getting back to the map. See these little red circles? 1, 2, 3, 4 circles. And I know I'm all over the place. I'm sorry about that, folks. But okay, so that one circle, that's my house. That's my house. See this circle here, that there, that's 9700 Grogan's Mill Road, where the two houses were. And we'll get a close-up in a second. This here, I made a bit of a foul up here. This is Lake Woodlands Drive, and that's View Trails. And it goes up around like that. And this is Technology Forest Drive. It used to be called Crescent Ridge Drive. And so that dot shouldn't be there, because you go up here, you turn right on Crescent Ridge Drive. You go down to where Hewitt Aon was, just before you get to the lake. And that's where that house is there. This over here, that's Target, believe it or not. That dot there, there's a white spot underneath that dot. I fouled it up. Target is not in the RUD. And you see this, there's the pavilion, because they predate the RUD. The pavilion's not in the RUD. That of course, there's what's there? Block of apartments there. Oh, we don't want that in the RUD. Voters. Woo! No, can't have any voters. And there's all these. This is River Road. All those high dollar condos and what have you along the river walk there, the river way or whatever they call it. And you look at this. This is major roads. Major roads. Who's driven along Woodlands Parkway at the bottom of the lake? And there's those fancy, southern style 3 or 4 story high dollar, the high dollar condo things in there? That's all that there. That's all that there. And it's so high dollar that apparently that's a major road. There's a major road runs right through there. It's in the RUD. Major road, right there. There's lots of major roads. Look at them. I don't know, some of them don't look all that major to me. And there you go. See up there on this 242 up there. See, you don't have to be contiguously, So those are all on the south side of 242. That long blue piece there. There's McDonald's and Whataburger and all that. And then there's the St. Luke's Hospital. And then across 242 is Lowe's and Walmart and the Chevron station and another little hotel. Those blue squares up there, see, they're in the road. They're in the road. Yep, yep. And then, you know, they're annexing these pieces down here, you know. And the annexation, that's the good thing, right? They can annex something, and then they can, guess what, they can de-annex. They can de-annex. But there's no voters, right? There's no voters in the district, so who decides? Who influences? I don't know where the intelligence and the impetus or the motivation to annex and de-annex comes from, because this is a mindless, you know, disinterested board. You know, I shouldn't say mindless, but they're disinterested. They're not beholden to the developer. They're using their own volition and ideas to come up with what's going to be annexed and de-annexed, right? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think everything they do is for the developer. That's my idea. And when you look at 9700 Grogan's Mill Road, and then this road goes down here now, that's the address, whatever that side road is there. What used to be 9700 got bulldozed, which he said they were torn down. But what he didn't say was, we didn't want residents there anymore either. They de-annexed it. So it's not even in the RUD anymore. See? It's not even in the RUD. So where there were voters, suddenly there are no more voters. You know? There you go, there's a close-up, I'm sorry. See, that's where, that's the land that's got de-annexed. That's where the 9700 was on Grogan's Mill Road.
Out of curiosity, Adrian, what is there? Parkland Place.
There's some fancy apartment things there.
Apartments?
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're not that fancy, but they're I'm
But
sure
they're
they're
apartments.
high dollar. Yeah, right on the. They're right on the waterway.
Okay.
Yeah, which I also, you know, I was kind of. I don't get it, but the waterway is even in the road. You know, see it? See the waterway? See the turning pool and all that? Beats the heck out of me. You know?
The fish can vote.
Huh?
The fish can vote.
There's got to be some reason why they did that. I didn't know that. Well, what's happening, guys? Are you all yawning? Are you sick of this already? What? I can't see.
Oh, is it?
The timer ran out. I'm sorry. So here's the house that Mr. Lorcan, his residence, his official residence, and it's a magnificent. This is off Google Earth. I didn't take these pictures. This is. It's 750 feet from the township offices. It's a big place. It's nice, and it's his residence. I respect that. That's fine.
That's the picture of it on the right.
Yeah, that's it. That's from the street, and that's from the space.
And it took me about 20 times to pass it so I could find that building, because it has 5 garage bays and it looked like an office building.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
a residence? It's a residence.
well, it's, you know, it's some quasi thing. I mean, it's a funny residence. When you drive up there, right in front of it, he's got a nice house, but it's in front of his house, there's a fire lane, you know, red curtains, there's no parking, you know.
Does he actually live there all the time, or?
You'd have to ask Mr. Lorcan that.
Oh.
And actually it's irrelevant. It's actually irrelevant, because he has the rights of the benefits of the state of Texas residence law. He has that same right. It's just that everyone else wants to share in that same right.
But he somehow, because he's one of the biggest taxpayers in the whole county, because he owns so many properties, he owns lots of properties.
Well, that's
He was
great.
able to get a variance to build his supposed residence in that
Well,
area.
and that's interesting because the township apparatus has no authority over that. It's
So
that's retained. That commercial CSC order, it's called, is retained by the developer.
So the developer gave the variance.
And it's not subject to open records or anything. It stinks. But here, you go to LDF Construction on this webpage, and here it is. It says, he's bragging about all his jobs, and this is the job. He said he built the Lorcan Retreat. And Sean Quinn is Mr. Lorcan's brother-in-law. And there's the architect. You can call up the architect and say, show me the plans, or go and have a look at them. I don't know. There you go. This was, you know, when I was down there talking to Carol Galtney about the voters that I found, and we'll get into that in a minute too, but the voters I found, we were looking through, and I said, well, here's this residence, because she had this email from Mike Page saying, hey, you know, where's the voters? And she didn't know where the voters were because the RUD in history had never contracted with county elections. And that's another problem with the freedom of MUDs and RUDs and all that. They don't have to do anything with elections in the, you know, as far as county goes. We're already paying for county elections office. They go off and have their own little elections wherever they want to. You know, that's got to change. That's not transparent.
Do these board members, do they have salaries? I know Mud did.
No, they just have a little fee put in. You know, but some, you know, they could vote themselves. Well, there was, oh, we were talking about examples of a special district that went haywire. Another one up north in Dallas area. They formed this thing to build whatever it was, you know, a mud district or a sewage or something or other. And, you know, they did that 15 years ago and they borrowed money and they taxed the people and they paid off the thing. They paid it off. They weren't paying it anymore. They kept collecting the tax. They kept collecting the tax. And the residents discovered this was going on. And they had to force these people to shut that thing down. They went through their expenses. They were having parties and, you know, they were having a good old time. I'm not kidding. That's in Texas, you know. So anyway, when I was sitting there with Carol Galtney, she looking up all these properties and that, she said, well, there's Lawkins one. And I saw it too. It said that it was, see, Lawkins properties on that street where the township offices are, most of them have got tax abatements. And when he built that complex and the offices that are next to it weren't in the picture, he got a tax abatement from the county and from the road. Again, Mike Page didn't know this guy, but he had done the paperwork on the tax abatements, right? And she said, well, that property, 2630, where he lived, that showed up as tax exempt. You know, and I said, Carol, please don't tell anybody. She said, go and talk to J.R. Moore. She said, go and talk to her. So, well, let me do it. I said, I want to take it to the press because I still had this stupid idea that the press was going to report anything, you know, something of what I said. It was like this whole issue. I'd sent them all this stuff before the election, way before. I said, look at this, look at this, look at this. I said, there's voters in the United Way office, in the villager office. There's voters registered in the villager office. The trouble was at the time, the editor of the Courier was on the board. I don't know if it was the trouble, but you know, he was on the board of the United Way. You know, so I guess he didn't want to make them look. I don't know. I don't know. You know, and that's the trouble. There are all these connections all the time. But anyway, so what happened was I saw that it was tax exempt, and then we went back a couple of days later. Oh, no, I saw it was tax exempt, and I went to J.R. Moore and I said, J.R., I found this property, and it says that it's tax exempt, but it's a residence. Oh, no. He says, well, do me an open records request, and I'll find out about it for you. He made me handwrite this thing, you know, right on the spot. And then, you know, a couple of days later, he got word back from the appraisal district. In response to your letter dated April the 26th, the following information is presented for your review. Dirk Walkian has recently has a homestead exemption effective for 2010, blah, blah, blah. They say it wasn't subject to the tax exemption, that particular residence. It would take a forensic accountant to follow all of this, but, you know, I don't know how things got changed, but it got changed. But then one day we found this record, so that was what date did I say? That was April the 27th. Well, this is March the 11th. This is the MCAD screen here, and that's the pop-up there. That was March the 11th. They apparently made the change on March the 11th. When I first discovered it, it was March the 1st, I think, or so right around there, you know. And there it was. The record got changed by somebody, you know. See, it says, Login does have a house amongst all of this, per Dennis Evans. It's okay to put a homestead on whatever, blah, 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 piece of land. You know, I don't know, you know. But it looked to me like the guy had been approved for a tax abatement, all the tax abatement agreements, which I've got the tax abatement agreements for those properties. It looks like it includes all of them here. He had 100% during the construction phase in 2000 and 100% during 2009. And we saw the property was built by LDF in 2009.
Have you ever looked at, your county keeps a record of taxes paid? You can look at prior years, so.
There's so many things I don't.
And were there any taxes?
Well, I mean,
received
who
on that
knows? I
property?
mean, I guess they could change that too. I don't
Well,
know.
that's true.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, you know, I don't know what's behind all of this sometimes, but it smells. It smells. Anyway, that's just a side issue. That's just a side issue, really. So where are we going? Where are we going with this? Here's, you know, the voters that I found. When I found 12 voters back in 2010. That's the Chevron building. There was a husband and wife registered there. This building, see, this is Grogan's Mill Road, and that's Woodlands Parkway. And there's this building here, not the East Square. That one there, that's that building on the corner. And there was a man there. He had built a residence inside there on the 3rd floor. He owned the building. And in fact, I'll read you what he said. I won't tell you his name. Protect the innocent, you know, because he's allowed to do this. Everyone's saying, oh, he's a commercial building. He can't vote from a commercial building. Well, that's phooey. That's phooey. You can vote from wherever you want. It's your residence. And here's his thing. He wrote to Carol Goldman on the back of his voter registration card. It says, this address is my residential address. This is an office building owned by a company of which I am a major owner. I have a living suite in the building, which is my residence in Texas. Thank you. He signs his name. What are you going to do? You're going to challenge his vote, say he couldn't vote for George Bush or Obama or whoever he voted for? Because he was in a commercial building?
No.
No. It's the rest of it. This one here. This here, that's a hospital. That's the Alzheimer's hospital on 6 properties, right? This is from this man. He's in the hospital. I assume he was a patient. I don't know. He might have been an employee. It doesn't matter to me. To whom it may concern, I'm writing to you in regards to not receiving my voter's registration card. My name is, I reside at 9182 Six Pines, the Woodlands. My date of birth is. I would appreciate your help in this matter. If you have any questions, please feel free to call. To the election to Carol Goldman. Right there. You can have a look at that if you want, you know. Just don't want to, you know, publicise broadcast for no reason. You know? So, you know, there's, oh, here, I live over in, this is Panther Creek Shops right near my house. And right in there's an insurance office and a husband and wife. They're registered to vote. They're not there anymore. They're still there, but they changed after all this kerfuffle, you know. They probably felt like they didn't want to be there anymore and be in the dragnet of, you know, Adrian Heath's troublemaking or whatever they want to call it. But, you know, they were registered to vote there, and I have no problem with that. If they call that their residence. It might shock you. You might not like the idea. You might think, oh boy, you know, they're going to ruin America. You know? I mean, that's the way the law is. That's what it says. We'll get to the details of that. And the residence inn. There's a man that's lived at the residence inn for a long time. Mike Page said he acknowledges him. He acknowledges the walk-ins, and the man that lives at the residence inn, he says he's probably the manager. Well, I know. I've spoken to him. The guy's not the manager. He lives there. He's single. That's what he wants to do. He wants someone to make his bed for him and clean up his stuff. Me too. It's a commercial property. So what? And you know, on my website, you know, when all this was going on, I found a video of the residence inn, you know, and they said it's not a room, it's a residence. You know, and they have an elephant walk around, open the refrigerator. Have you seen that?
Is he divorced? It's probably cheaper to live there.
Anyway, so you know, there was all these residents. You know, I said to when I was talking to the Secretary of State, I said, I've got this guy at the residence inn, I've got these other voters there, and you know, the story about the DEA agents, you know, it's okay under the law. I said, yeah. I said, well, so what you're saying is that, you know, the residence inn they're not going to have an election because there's no voters. I said, I could decide to make the residents in my residence, you know, under the law, and I could go and vote in the election. He said, you could certainly do that. And he says, I'd love to see the look on their face if you did. That's what the guy said, you know. Now, I don't have a recording of that.
Which guy?
Guy, the Secretary of State, the authority on votable law, the Secretary of State, the guy that I spoke to. And, you know, he'll back me up, we'll see. But even if he doesn't, the principle is there, you know. Like the Texas Watchdog said, voter loophole. You know, they used a voter loophole. No, they don't. It's not a voter loophole. That's a principle of the law of the state of Texas. Hopefully we'll get somewhere here. Oh, these were the voters. You don't want to see that. You can look at it later if you want. Okay. Okay, establishing residence for voting purposes, the RUD, according to the law, right? So here we go. That's the voter registration thing. And it says here, let me read this. And they made a big deal. We had a civil lawsuit, an election contest, and the guy made a big deal about this. He says, "Oh, you signed this. You know, did you fraudulently sign this? Did you?" No, we didn't fraudulently sign anything. Here's item 9 when you want to change your address, right? I understand that giving false information to procure voter registration is perjury and a crime under the state and federal laws. Conviction of this crime may result in imprisonment of up to 180 days, a fine of up to $2,000 or both. Please read all 3 statements to affirm before signing. I am a resident of this county and a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Any problems?
No.
I have not been finally convicted yet. Or if a felon, I have completed all my punishment. I have not been determined by a final judgment of a court of law exercising probate jurisdiction to be totally mentally incapacitated or partially mentally incapacitated without the right to vote. Well, I haven't. You know, maybe some people think I should be. But I haven't.
Are we recording this? Yes.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube. This is one of the cases. You know, we want equal protection under the law. Now, Senator Brian Birdwell, this is out of the Texas Constitution. It says, qualifications of senators. No person shall be a senator unless he is a citizen of the United States. This is Texas senator. Senator of the United States, at the time of his election, a qualified voter of this state, and shall have been a resident of the state for 5 years, next preceding his election, and the last year thereof a resident of the district for which he shall be chosen, shall have attained an age of 26 years. Right? So he's got to be lived in Texas for 5 years, lived in the district for 1, he's got to be 26. And he's got to be a citizen. Right? Here he is. Now, you see his face? You see the colour of his skin? Do you see that? He was at the Pentagon at 9/11. He was burnt over, I think I said 60% of his body. You know. And you know, I mean, I appreciate, you know, people that serve and pay a price. That, you know, they've done a lot more than we have in service, right, to the country, or you know, the situation 9/11, right? I mean, that is awesome that happened and that he survived. Of course, many died, you know, but he survived. So there was the seat was being vacated by a guy who was too old, not well, Republican, and he didn't want to run, so Birdwell was going to run. And he had been in hospital in Virginia, and he lived in Virginia when he was at the Pentagon, you know. Well, the trouble is, and the Texas Tribune, you can go to the website on that story, and they've got the documents there. Brian Birdwell voted in Virginia in the same election that he voted in Texas. So he voted for the president twice. He did. He did. He did. But the Democrats, you know, they wanted to win the seat. The guy that was vacating, he was worried that Birdwell would lose because of the challenge, and he was thinking of even staying on the ballot, because he ended up on the ballot, but he wasn't going to run, you know. But he was worried, you know. The Democrats challenged it, and this is politicised. I will tell you, this whole voter fraud question in Texas, it's just politics, you know. There's not a whole lot being gained. There's not a lot of justice and truth coming out of it, you know. They're victimising a lot of people, I think, for political purposes. Anyway, so the Democrats challenged, you know, because they found he had voted twice, and they questioned whether he'd lived in Texas long enough, and ended up going to court. And it says here, this afternoon, the 5th Court of Appeals of Dallas denied the suit filed against Senator Birdwell by the Democrat Party, and Senator Birdwell had to have him removed from the ballot. A unanimous ruling, 3-justice panel found the Democrats failed to prove that Birdwell was ineligible as a candidate. Now, you know, I've spoken to the Democrat expert attorneys and I've spoken to the Republican expert attorneys, and they all agree on one thing. They all agree on one thing. That voter registration, residence for the purpose of voter registration is in the mind of the voter. They agree on that. But some people don't agree on it, apparently. But anyway, and the Republican guy, who will remain nameless, he told me, he said I should use this case in our case, because he says that it's the same story, you know. The guy established his residence by his own volition, you know. And anyway, the court supported him. That's all we're asking for. That's all we're asking for. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'll try and wrap it up quickly. Is that what that noise was?
Yeah, that's that way.
Yeah. Sorry, are you guys bored?
No, but we have to wrap it up.
Okay, well, just bear with me.
Utilities will be shut off shortly.
The what? Anyway, here's I like this email here. This is from Mike Page to the board, right? Gene Miller, Buck Davenport, Bill Neal, Rich DeBone, who works at Anadarko, and Ellie Mayhew, whoever that is. That's the other board member. He's got funny. But he copies in Alex Sutton and Richard Durr from the developer, right? Who's he reporting to? Who's in charge? Right. Says it appears that our friends at the Courier are going to run a story about the Rudd election on Wednesday, because, you know, what happened was I filed and changed my residence back in February, I think, or March, and then over the time, as the time drew nearer, a bunch of others, brave people that saw the problem and recognised it, they followed suit, and we ended up with 10 people, you know, and the election's impending, right? Right, because it's May the 8th. The election was May the 8th. Here's on May the 7th. It says they're going to write a story to stir the pot a bit. And I kind of identify with the guy here. He says, courtesy of Mr. Adrian Heath and his friends who are running in the election, many of whom, and he puts 22, because he found, now he knew about all the other voters that I'd found, plus the 10, right? So he said there was 22. 22 have registered to vote in the election using a business address. You know, and that's all this, you know, bugbear, business address. Oh, we can't vote for a business address, you know. And he you know, questions all the validity of them. It says those people, the Montgomery County Voter Registrar has registered these people officially, so the Rudd has no legal basis to challenge their eligibility to vote in the election, even if wrongdoing is suspected. So far, no one other than the 2 clearly eligible voters in the Rudd, Mr. and Mrs. Lorcan, have voted during the early voting. It remains to be seen whether anyone else will vote on May 8th. A letter was sent by the DA to all the registered voters. I don't know if that's true. I think he just sent it to the 10, but you know, we want to find that out. The Rudd's cautioning them to seek legal advice about their residency requirement under Texas law. Well, we sought legal advice. We sought legal advice. The highest legal advice. Mike Page is not the highest, as much as he might think he is. And neither is his cronies that sued us and all that and did the election contest. I'll keep going. The Courier seems uninterested in this potential voter fraud. You know, that is ironic. You know, because I thought they were uninterested too. You know, I couldn't get them to print anything. You know, and here's Mike crying about the same thing. Yeah. Or in the benefits of the entire Woodlands community that the Rudd has brought over the last 20 years. courtesy of, and at the sole expense of the business community. Here he is crying away.
Yeah.
He offers to resign at the end of this email. You've got to see it, it's so funny, you know. But expense of the business community. Instead, they're more interested in who complained to the DA, and the fact that there's been only 2 voters, or 2 or no voters in the road for almost 10 years. They shouldn't worry about that. They don't seem to understand or care that it's irrelevant how many voters there are. We don't want no stinking voters. No. If there is no opposition candidates, whether there's 0, 1 or 10,000 voters, doesn't matter how many voters there are if no one's running against the candidates, against the members, right? Well, heck, if people knew that they could vote, if the thing existed, then they would have been a challenge, you know? But they keep it all so secret. No one knew. No one ever knew. I lived there for 20 years and I never knew the road utility existed. Road existed. There's no opposition candidates and so on. I mean, I think that's egregious. I really do. The attitude. Here's what happened. May 8th came along, we voted, you know, Mike Bass says we tried to vote. Well, we voted. We voted. And we won. We were 10-2. 10-2. So we threw out the bums, you know. Yeah. And then the election contest, it all happened very quickly within a week. We found out about it. Somebody told us that they were doing this restraining order, and you know, and effectively the Rudd sued itself to disqualify the voters, and we found out, and so we intervened. Our attorney said, "Oh, intervene." So we were the interveners, you know. We went and said, "Hey, wait a minute, our votes are good. We are registered voters. We're allowed to be, you know." And then there was the appeal, and we lost the appeal because of different reasons. And you know, you can talk to our attorney at the time and see, ask him what happened there. The indictment came along, and then there's a trial coming. Here we go. And you've got to stay for this bit. Okay, election law opinion GSC1. This is like the gold standard for me, and I think it's the gold standard for anybody. This is the highest law, chief election officer of the state of Texas. This is his opinion, right? And it hasn't been overruled or anything. It was January 22nd, 2004, and it came from a question that Perry made to Jeff Connor at the time. And what was the case? The case was that there were students at Prairie View A&M that were living on the campus, and they were voting in Waller County, and the people of Waller County didn't like it because, you know, it was messing up their show, you know, just like the Woodlands, I suppose, you know. They didn't like it. Oh, those students, they're not permanent residents, they have no intention. No, they can't vote from a dorm. You know, it's like a commercial, this is just about as bad as a commercial building. They can't do that. Well, here's what the result was. And you know, there's underlying law underneath this decision too, but it goes back quite a ways. Here's the question. This was the question. What is the proper interpretation and application of section 1.015 of the election code in the context of voter registration by and residency of college students? So it's about college students, but it's still applicable to any other case. The principles are. And here's the short answer. The definition of residence for the purpose of voter registration is well settled. Well settled. Let me emphasize that. As stated in the seminal case of Mills versus Bartlett, neither bodily presence alone nor intention alone is suffice to create a residence, right? So being there doesn't create the residence on its own. Thinking you want to make it your residence, it's not enough. The two, when the two coincide, right? Bodily presence alone, intention alone will suffice, nor intention alone will suffice to create the residence. But when the two coincide, at that moment, the residence is fixed and determined. There's no specific length of time for the bodily presence to continue. What? Well, that's right, because like 25 states, there's no time limit.
Right.
Now, if you hate it that much, then let's make a time limit. But let's not get people and put them through a ringer and grind them up and make them spend $10,000 each for fun, or maybe lose and go to jail. You know, here's the gold standard. Here it is, right here. And it does make me mad. It makes me mad. Not just me, you know, it's not just woe is me. There's a 63-year-old grandmother in this case. There's a 30-odd-year mother of 3. There's a man that's got cancer right now. You know, involved.
What is the indictment exactly?
Well, the charge is that we knowingly, I can't remember the wording, but you know, we did that and we knew it was wrong. We knowingly voted in a election or in a district that we knew we weren't residents or weren't allowed to vote.
That's one of the hardest things to prove. Why would the DA proceed on that?
The DA didn't.
The DA did.
The DA, as far as I know, and I don't know so if you can say, no, you can't say. But
Well,
as far as I know,
Who's prosecuting you?
well, so that's another story. That's part 2, I suppose. So let's keep going because you know.
Well, part 1.
Yeah, we need to wind down. So anyway, here's another section of the same. It's a very long opinion. It says there are a plethora of election cases on Texas residents regarding both voters and candidates. Because of the fact-intensive nature of the residents' question, some have argued that it is possible to select one or another as proving the certain factor is dispositive with respect to the question of intent for resident purposes. Right? Dispositive means, you know, we can decide. There's enough information there. It settles it, right? No. He says no. He says, however, it's the opinion of this office that such an approach can be misleading. The one constant in the common law tests that have been approved by the Texas Supreme Court and federal courts interpreting Texas law is that one factor is that no one factor is dispositive. No one factor. No one factor. There's an array of factors. The meaning that must be given to it, residents, depends upon the circumstances surrounding the person involved and largely depends upon the present intention of the individual. Volition, intention, and action are all elements to be considered in determining whether a person resides, and such elements are equally pertinent to denoting the permanent residence of domicile.
Well, Adrian, though, he'd have to have someone that heard you say something like, we're going to do this even though we know it's illegal.
Yeah, damn it. Yeah, I don't care what they say.
How
I'm
do you
doing
even
it.
think they have a case? That doesn't make any sense to me that they're wasting our tax dollars
But
on one of the
yeah,
hardest
even-
things
I
there is
mean-
to prove in any criminal case, which is state of mind.
Well, it's political. It's political. You know, and I will diverge
So who's
quickly.
prosecuting?
Okay, so the Attorney General, Greg Abbott, is prosecuting this. He's got a special prosecutor, a young guy named Jonathan White, who came down and called the grand jury and made the presentation and got us indicted. And Sam, right here.
Who drove it?
Okay, so who drove it? So one time, one of our fellows was at a precinct chairs meeting, and he saw a particular senator at the meeting, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about this Rudd thing? What a fiasco!" Meaning, you know, what the story I'm telling you, you know, that he would identify with it, you know, the outrage and the, you know, Republican form of government and all that, you know. And so Tommy Williams apparently went beet red and exploded and says, outrageous, I'm going to make sure those guys go to jail or something like that. I'm going to have them flung in jail, you know. That was way back early in the piece.
Well, that'd be basis for dismissing the case too, in fact, we would say that.
Anyway, so all these little bodies, all these little sentinels, yeah, you can go if you want, I'm sorry.
But there's more to that.
All these little sentinels that are tied in with the road and the developer and all this and that, you know, they wanted to get this thing ramrodded and driven home, and I guess they went round up to Phil Grant at the time and to Brett Ligon and said, yeah, they broke the law, you know, they're going to send them to jail and all that. And from what I gather, he might have said, no, I don't think. You know, there was comments in the paper, it's vague and this and that. So I assume, I'm reading between the lines, that he declined to do that.
Who was that?
Okay, those,
Brett
Brett,
Lee.
Pat, you have to come up here if you want to stop the discussion.
Who?
So we are running out of time. And this won't stop for another hour unless we stop it, so.
I'm sorry, I was just getting to the...
I know it's gonna
And it is. Do y'all
Okay.
wish to stay? We have a board meeting afterwards that also is open. Do y'all wish to stay longer to hear?
So let's cut this off for now. We can bring it back. We're bringing back somebody, whatever we can schedule them in. Out the other side.
I don't know.
So we're doing that, and so probably just postpone, and part 2 is coming.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, folks, I'm coming back later.
Okay.
It's a lot. Thank you very much.
date things for y'all. Sunday, April 14th at 1 o'clock in Bastrop is places to be determined yet. It's a 3-hour workshop on election day petition.